Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Purpose People podcast. We've got Steve from Britannic Place. So thanks for joining us.
That's right. Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So obviously one of the things that we want to talk about is the end of the journey. And because most people sort of like do the journey and then figure it out at the end, but it might be helpful to learn a little bit about starting with the end in mind, retirement, investment, that sort of stuff. So just tell us a little bit about what your role is in the business and what you actually do on a day-to-day basis. Let's start there.
So I mean, I'm the principal and founder of the business. My role, I suppose, is multifaceted at the moment. I deal directly with clients, so I have that client relationship. I advise clients directly, but also I'm involved in running the business.
Yeah.
So got all the elements to that. So what I'd like to do is try and focus my time on sort of the strategic direction of the business. At the moment, I also get involved with probably more of the day-to-day than I would like.
Yeah, of course.
So talking about sort of what's the end game, well, certainly in terms of the business, I'd like to get to a position where it can be run without too much sort of input from me.
Yeah, of course.
On a day-to-day basis. But so, I mean, in terms of running it, obviously there's the staffing issues, which any business that has staff will encounter. But obviously we've got the regulatory side of things as well. So we've got regulatory reporting to the regulator requires. Then I get involved in. I've got an accountant, but obviously I've got to produce a lot of information ready for that accountant. So yeah, there's lots of day-to-day sort of management tasks on top of the sort of day-to-day client relationships.
So in terms of managing people and managing people's wealth and stuff like this, what's the sort of like the overriding feel for it? Do you feel that people come to you too late, or they think they come to you too late in life, or do you think, or you see more and more people coming to you at a younger age to say, hey, let's make a plan?
So I'd say that our kind of target market is actually those people who are coming up towards retirement,
right? Okay,
or into retirement. So actually, we're quite fortunate in that respect, because that actually is a sort of time in people's lives where they start thinking about it seriously. And so, coming to us when they're thinking about retirement, they're sort of making their way, sort of getting to that stage where they're looking to retire, or maybe they've actually reached that point at which they want to leave work and retire, and they want to work with a financial planner to firstly work out whether retiring is a realistic option.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What we also try and do is help them to understand what kind of life they want to live in retirement. So it's as much about what you're going to retire to, as it is about what you're retiring from.
Yeah, of course.
So mostly clients come to us with that. I mean, we do have a few younger clients, but it's not really our business model at the moment. I mean, I suppose, to be frank, from a commercial point of view, we've kind of focused on that sort of at retirement or in retirement space.
Yeah,
because it makes sense commercially. You've got clients that have already built up quite a bit of wealth. I mean, it'd be great if we could find a model where we could sort of profitably deal with and provide a service to more of that kind of accumulation that younger people sort of trying to build towards retirement. But I mean, the problem, we're such a small business anyway. We can only work with, because of the kind of comprehensive nature of what we do, we can only work with a certain number of clients. So there's actually plenty of clients in our current target market to keep us pretty busy. So
what would you say is the sort of the overriding questions that people have with you? Like, obviously that people have questions. So what, having done this so many times, you must get some consistent questions that often come across your path.
Yeah. So, I mean, when people first come to us, often they might come to us with a sort of product related question, or I want some help with my pension, or, I want to know if this investment is right or whatever. But really, when you sort of get into it and start talking to clients properly, What they really want to know is, can they live the life that they want in retirement without worrying about running out of money?
Yeah.
Or alternatively, for some clients who are very wealthy, without dying with too much. So that, the tax man maybe takes a big chunk of the wealth rather than passing it to their children or grandchildren. I also try and focus on an additional point, which is, if you've died with too much, if you've got loads and loads of wealth and you're the richest man in the graveyard, well, what it means is that you actually haven't done all of those things in life that you could have done.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's important to sort of do proper financial planning, because without that, you're kind of sticking your finger in the air. If you do proper financial planning, you've got better sort of foresight of what that financial future looks like. And then you can make decisions and choices and live a life with the confidence that you're not going to run out of money or die with too much.
So your typical clients, are they normally like people that have worked for somebody else for many, many years, or are they normally business owners and entrepreneurs? What would you say the split is of the type of clients that you work with?
Yeah, I'd say the majority of clients I work with have been at some point a small business owner.
Yeah.
So we, obviously I run a small business, so
you know what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely. You can talk their language. You understand the challenges that they're going through, the difficulties they've faced, often the effort that they've put in to achieve the success that they've had. So yeah, I'd say large number of clients are small business owners or previously ran a small business. We also work with people who were employed, but typically they'll be kind of senior level employees generally.
Okay. Yeah. So when we talked about like the type of questions that they might have, if you had your life again, what would you do differently in terms of financial planning?
What would I do differently?
Not to like disclose all your plans. That castle in Scotland.
I'm a financial planner, so I mean my finances are absolutely perfect. I've managed everything. To be honest, I do. I mean, I do take my own medicine, really. So I wouldn't change too much. I think possibly at the moment I'm at a point where I need to think a bit more about. I mean, I've been so focused on sort of trying to, grow the business, make the business successful, and much in the same way as I get my clients to think about this. I think I need to think a bit more about whether I've got that balance right between, focusing on the work and saving towards my retirement and all that sort of stuff, and actually living in the here and now and enjoying, what I can with my life at the moment.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because for us, we're talking about the Purpose People podcast, and so people that are more purposeful, obviously more productive, they're obviously in businesses that are more profitable as well. So from your perspective, what do you think you're living life on purpose?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, I have a young family. I've got 3 children.
Yeah.
I'm highly engaged in the stuff that they do, and that's really important to me. In terms of my background, I didn't necessarily have that when I was growing up, and it's something that's really important to me. I go to as many sporting events that my kids get involved with, or music events if they're involved with that. I get involved with. I coach my son's rugby team. I manage his cricket team. So we definitely sort of. I mean that's my sort of my family is my main purpose rather than anything else. Having said that, I mean I would say also, I had to undertake an exercise a few years back with a consultant I was working with to sort of clarify my sort of vision for the business, and sort of there was an exercise he took us through about why do you do what you do, and whilst obviously a large part of that was about providing for my family, there was also an element of me wanting to run a successful business, and that's actually quite important. That's actually part of my purpose as well. And I suppose part of that, again, most things in life sort of hark back to your childhood.
100%.
And I guess, there's a few things that I want to prove a few people wrong, basically, and show, that I can be successful and I can run a successful business. And so that's partly part of my purpose as well. I want to have a great family life, bring up decent human beings, enjoy, them growing up, but also I want to run a successful business that benefits lots of other people as well.
Yeah, and I think out of that, that's more than what most people want to take on in life. I think for me, the fact that you said in the beginning, you said, "Look, I didn't quite have this, so I am doing this," already means that if you're looking at a progression of a generation, you're already making adjustments, learning from what you went through in the past to then deal with what's going on in the present. But at the same time, you're planning the future and other people's future. And I think that's one of the things I talk about in purpose, is that it's understanding the past, learning from it, because no one's past is perfect, right? Making those decisions in the present that are going to allow you to make those changes. And then the future is essentially plan the future that you want. So, for example, if you want a holiday and go to America, well, what steps are you going to put in place to be able to do that? And so for me, it might be that you share with people so you're a bit more accountable to where you want to go, or you might have a savings pot or whatever it may be to get you towards that goal. But if without no future, you can't change what the future looks like if you haven't planned it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So for me, it's like the fact that you've already seen, this is what my family was like, this is what mine is, it's different already, and now you're proving people wrong because you're in the middle of growing a business and scaling it or whatever. You're already making routes to do that, but not everybody does that. Some people are still sat there going, I wonder what it would be like if I started a business, or I'd love to be around my kids a bit more, and not prepared to make those big changes that obviously you have, Yeah. So in terms of financial planning, because I think finances are scary for a lot of people.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. What's the quickest, fastest way to sort of like get a grip on your finances, would you say?
Other than working with a financial planner?
Yeah. Or with making steps too, because it's like getting a cleaner, isn't it? You pre-clean before you clean.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Interesting analogy. I think getting a grip on your spending. You need to understand how much you're spending. I mean, one of the exercises that we do with new clients when we take them on is we get them to complete an expenditure spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Because we do financial forecasts, so we look at what your financial future is going to look like. But obviously, you can't do that without understanding, well, what kind of spending are you going to do?
Yeah.
So we get clients to do the expenditure spreadsheet, and I think that's an exercise you can easily do at home yourself. Have a real good look at what it is you're spending your money on.
Yeah.
Because it's
it mounts up.
Yeah, so it's. I'm just trying to think that what is that sort of that story about that basically if your spending is if something to do with if you're earning so much but if you're spending less, then you're happy. But even if you're earning like 3 times as much but you're spending more, then obviously you're really unhappy. So you have to live within those means.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say that you've got 2 choices. If you want to change your lifestyle, let's say, either make comeback, cuts if you want to stay where you are, or essentially get paid more. So, like in business, for example, you either go for the exercise of leaning, cutting down things that need to be counted, or get out there and make more sales.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But something has to change. If you stay here, you're going to be in the same position you are next year if you don't make those changes. And I think for me in the entrepreneurial world, a lot of people have done the lean bit, and now people are like, right, I need to get out there and sell. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but the reality is if you want to change the course and trajectory of your business, you need to get out there and talk to strangers. And it's what I find incredible is the more people I meet networking, a lot of first-time networkers or second-time, one of the biggest things that they've done is they've never done this before, as in they never got out there talking to strangers. And what I've learned is that the more conversation you have, the more opportunities do exist.
I think some people see selling as a dirty word sometimes, don't they? They sort of, it's not seen necessarily as a good thing to be doing, but all business is about sales, isn't it? Everything is selling.
Yeah, but the key thing, again, sometimes it's reframing.
Yeah,
it's not being clever with marketing words. It is actually reframing. It's like your business. No, you're not selling. You're serving. How do I maximize what you have for the long term? That in essence is what you're doing. And if you don't work with someone like yourself, then it's going to be a tough life in your latter life when you don't have as much energy. As you might have a lot of time, but not as much energy to do the things that you could have done if you had had a conversation with someone like yourself. Yeah. So I think for me, it's like when I started networking, exactly that. It was like, well, yeah, I don't want to sell to the room because I've seen that before where someone comes in and here's my business card. Oh yeah, give me a call and I'll sort you out type stuff. Where it's not, it's about building the depth of relationships and see how you can help one another. And I think for me, that's the shift in that world. And it's a service of yourself where it's directly affecting business owners, their families and whatever else. I can't think of too many other businesses that serve in that manner because that's what you were doing.
And I mean, the way we work with clients, is we have that long-term, ongoing relationship with them.
Yeah.
So it is a very, very long-term, potentially relationship with clients, and so you've got to be able to build relationships and maintain relationships. And one of the easiest ways of doing that is just doing what you say you're going to do. Actually delivering on what you're saying you're going to do.
So just, I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot here or testing you or anything, but if you did nothing as the average person, what are we looking at as a pension at the moment?
Well, you say if you did nothing. I mean, there is obviously the auto-enrollment legislation. So if you go and work for someone, then for most people, they will automatically put you into an arrangement where you will have to pay it in, but also the employer will pay it in. And obviously on your contribution, you're going to get tax relief as well. So things are going to build up automatically. But let's be frank, if all you're doing is getting the minimum auto-enrollment pension, it's not going to provide a really powerful, So what would be the
average?
Retirement.
What's the average salary then for the average? When you talk about if you did that, let's say, what do you know what the average is at the moment that people are bringing in per year per pension?
Oh, I couldn't tell you what because obviously the auto enrollment's only been in place for a number of years.
Yeah, of course.
People who are sort of starting out in their career, who started out in auto enrollment, they're not yet reaching retirement. So I couldn't tell you what sort of pot they would have.
Of course.
I mean, there are some.
But there's statistics that exist. What the average person retired next month, what they would be expected to bring.
Well, there's something quite interesting with I can't remember what the Pension and Living Standards Association or something like that. There's a body that's done some research about what level of income you need in retirement to live certain lifestyles. So they've got like a basic level. And I think for couples that's a net income of about, I think it's about £24,000 a year. And that's like basic subsistence.
Yeah.
And actually that's covered. For most people, that's actually covered by the new single tier state pension. Yeah. But then there's your kind of the moderate level.
Yeah.
And I've got a feeling that's about 44,000 or something. Maybe not. I should have checked these figures before coming. But and that's a sort of a moderate sort of level of retirement. Yeah. And then you've got a comfortable retirement, and I think that's about £59,000 a year in total income.
Yeah.
And that's not total income. That's expenditure.
Yeah.
So you'd need to earn more than that in order to generate a net income that produces covers that expenditure.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the kind of levels that this sort of independent body has come up with in terms of.
But that's my point. When you look at it, the figures aren't great, are they? If you look at the cost of living now, and look at what 24 grand could do for a couple. It's not a huge amount of money.
Absolutely not. No. Well, this is it. If you're relying on the basic state pension or the single tier state pension to provide you with a good lifestyle, that's not going to happen. It's it's a very basic lifestyle that it'll provide.
Yeah.
The auto enrollment will give you a bit of a top up there. But like I say, I couldn't quote figures, but it's not going to generate even the moderate lifestyle, never mind the comfortable lifestyle. Yeah. So you need to be thinking about adding to that ideally. But obviously it's difficult, isn't it? Because, like you said, cost of living, but I guess just living a lifestyle at the moment is tricky with all the bills going up. And, when you're younger, you've got kids and, there's always expenses, aren't there? So,
but I guess the key thing then is the question is, what do you want out of life, isn't it? And you ask, well, what does retirement look like? I guess that's some of the questions that you ask people is like, well, what do you want in life? And if you want to travel the world and do this, then you've got to make some big changes short term in order to embrace this new lifestyle that you are.
Yeah. So again, because of the nature of the kind of clients that we work with, we're not sort of seeing them maybe early enough to think about telling, when they're maybe in their 30s or something, talking about what kind of retirement lifestyle do you want to live. We're getting people when they're actually, it's probably a bit too late to rectify it too much.
Yeah.
Again, I suppose we've got some clients where they're still, running businesses and they're able to chuck in a load of cash into their pension. Saves them a hell of a lot of tax, especially with things like, the corporation tax rate going up as it has done recently, particularly if they're in that sort of sweet spot between, if they've got profits between 50 and 250, effectively you're getting 26.5% corporation tax deduction for pension contributions. So really, really attractive for small business owners in that space to make those levels of contribution. But we're not really talking to many people sort of in their 30s or early 40s and necessarily looking at what they need to put in. We could do that. We could design a service to do that, but it's just with the experience that I've got and the type of client I've worked with, it just works with sort of slightly older clients than that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think the thing is, the overriding aspect is people don't want to admit that they're going to get old at some point. It's like we're going to continually live this utopia life with this level of income. I think in a real micro level of life, and as an illustration, is in football. So in football, you'll get an apprenticeship that signs professional forms, and often what happens, which is the clubs are trying to deal with now, but what would happen is traditionally they would get their first contract. And the first thing they do is they go down to the local garage and get the biggest, flashiest car possible. Yeah. Not knowing that they're going to get the second year of that contract. So what they do is they end up with a lot of young boys leaving the club with ridiculous amount of debts because in their head they're going to be the next Wayne Rooney, Ronaldo, whoever, because they haven't thought about the long term. And I think when you take that as an illustration, that's an obvious one. It's quite big, but it's the same in life in general. It's like at some point you've got to start doing stuff in the short term that's going to affect the long term. Now I get there's a school of thought, but I don't know if I'm going to make it to the long term. But that's a chance that we are living longer, and that's a chance don't really want to take. Really, it's about being planned and being safe.
Well, like many things in life, it's about a balance, isn't it? And you need to balance out the sort of here and now, because ultimately life's not a rehearsal.
Yeah, that's right.
So you need to be doing things now rather than waiting until time's passed you by.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to be providing for the future as well. And that is a fine balance to get right. There's no doubt about it.
So you mentioned that you did a bit of vision work for your company. What was that? What's the vision of your company? Because you mentioned you're about impacting people, which is amazing because you want to help them. Is that the core vision of what you're about and why you exist?
Well, you can look at it from a couple of different ways, can't you? So obviously we want to have a big impact on our clients' lives and help our clients to live the best life that they can with the resources that they've got. And that's a big purpose for the business. If you look at it though on a pure kind of like business planning point of view, there's a slightly different sort of emphasis there. So you look at more kind of what. So we went through an exercise that was similar. We mentioned earlier about you and I privately about the Traction, Gino Wickman's follows a similar sort of model. But we did this. We did some planning, so we got a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, and a 10-year plan. And the idea with a 10-year plan is it's what he calls a big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my 10-year plan is to be, for my business, Britannic Place, to be recognised sort of as a nationally recognised financial planning business. Mm-hmm. And I've got some other sort of financial targets around that as well, but also be recognised as an employer of choice locally. So I want to, one of the big parts about what I'm doing, I want to develop other people.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a bit of a problem in financial planning in that there's a shortage of people going into the profession.
Right.
So I'm really keen. I mean, partly for that, but I mean, partly for my own sort of business planning sort of objectives. I want to develop good staff.
Of course.
And in order to grow the business, you can't really grow the business without more staff. And to run a good successful business, you need really, really good staff.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I want to get really good at training staff and developing staff, and helping them to meet their in their goals and objectives as well.
Are there, obviously, are there any, I mean, I know you can't sort of major on particular companies or whatever, but, are there any innovative products that are out there, particularly in the sort of like the pension space or investment space? I'll give you an example. So I heard a few years ago, actually, that in Germany, they do a thing called the 100-year mortgage. So it's a generational mortgage. So basically what you do is you get the whole family buying into this mortgage, which is why they have bigger plots of land and bigger houses without barns, and yet it just carries on. So it's like, I'm thinking, God, that's a very interesting product that I've never heard of before. That is obviously modelled in one country, but not here. Are there sort of like innovative products that you've heard in the space?
I'm afraid I'd probably say not that much. There's not. So a lot of what we do, to be honest, is relatively sort of, you might call boring. It's just sensible sort of planning, because I think you have to be a bit careful sort of not to get sort of caught out by sort of the next shiny thing.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that, particularly in the financial services space, there's been a lot of that historically. And there's frankly a lot of BS about, and unfortunately people get caught by it. And actually with financial services, actually the sort of those sort of long established sort of traits are often better. So I mean, the only thing I can think of that maybe is a little bit like that is, and this is not a new innovative product or anything, but you used to, with pensions for business owners, you used to be able to do a lot of sort of intergenerational planning through something called a SAS, which is a small self-administered scheme, where you might see different generations of a family that own a business together might pool their pension funds to facilitate certain stuff within the business.
Right.
I think there's a bit less flexibility to do that nowadays with the changes that have been made to some of the pension legislation, but that was something that historically was possible.
Yeah, I think one of the big shifts I've seen, from particularly with the pension, is actually finding out what your pensions are being spent on. So literally, like if you go for a high risk pension, what companies is that money being invested in? Whereas before that used to be completely, you couldn't find out. Now you can, and there are apps out there that you could literally type in whatever and you could find out that, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was invested in arms, for example. So I think that's something that's come out as a sense of, an initiative like Clean Money. It's just like, well, what's actually happening with money? And you can find that stuff out, which you couldn't many years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a big drive within financial services regarding ESG products. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance.
Yeah.
And the regulators just brought out some new rules, actually, because obviously there's this fear of what they call greenwashing. Again, you've probably heard of that, but it's basically where something's sort of made to sound as if it's really good from an ESG point of view, but actually when you look under the bonnet, it's not necessarily the case. And so, like I say, the regulators sort of making steps to deal with that. And it is that there are there's a lot more you can do on that front. You can look at stuff. I mean, we're so one key difference. Well, there's one issue when it comes to advising clients on investments is how do you go about approaching that? And you can either buy into. So I mentioned some of the BS earlier. You can either buy into that there are fund managers or stockbrokers who can look into their crystal ball and tell you which is going to be the next successful business.
Yeah.
And they'll charge you a lot of money for that. So even if they get it right, they've got to get it right by more than the level of their costs.
Yeah.
Or you can just buy into that investing in companies works across the board, and you can buy the whole market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the whole market with a slight variation. I won't go into that too much detail, but generally, just got to get into the market at a low cost, and that's essentially what we call, or what a lot of people call, evidence-based investing, and that's the space that we're in.
Okay,
very much about evidence-based investing. So, I mean, if you take it down right to the lowest level, if you just buy the market, then effectively, you're buying shares in all of the companies on the whole market. If ESG was a concern for you, that's something which we're seeing more and more with clients, and we've got a number of clients where they've actively stated that that they don't want to invest in areas that aren't ESG. Then there are different ways that you can invest that will filter out certain companies if they don't meet certain criteria.
Yeah. So in terms of like you now, obviously as a father, you've obviously talked about the family's different from the one that you've come from, and now you whatever. What advice would you be giving to your children now? When they hit that sort of like time of working, what advice would you say?
God, yeah, that's a big question, really, though, isn't it?
Well, let's bring it down to finances and stuff like that first. What would you be saying to them that they should be doing as a young person that most people wouldn't even think of?
Well, always remember my wife talks about the fact that her parents were very much sort of that view that you find what you're passionate about, or whatever what you like, and you just do that. But was it Chris Rock who said something like that you shouldn't be telling people to do that? You should tell them to find what they're good at and what they can earn a bit of money from. Yeah, and then tell them to do that.
Because you can be passionate about something but not be good at it. So it's like with purpose. When I talk about purpose, is that you can discover your purpose, but it might not be your passion. But in doing it, it becomes your passion because you're very good at it. And so, us as parents, let's say, is to help our children discover what they're really good at and lean into that. You see, I'm passionate about football, not necessarily I didn't make it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, you're passionate about, so you'll make it. No, that's not enough. At that level, it's like, have you got natural talent, first and foremost? Then have you got the mindset to do it? And then, have you got the resilience to put up with the fans? 60,000 people in a stadium saying you're rubbish when you miss a chance. Let's say.
The pressure.
So for me, it's like it's absolutely about finding what you're good at and being and applying yourself to it, and naturally you get rewarded for it. But it's what happens to that reward. That's my point. Is that what would you be saying to a child then who's earning a decent amount of money? Do you go enjoy it, or do you go? Well,
yeah.
How would you get them to manage that?
I suppose is that phrase sort of pay yourself first.
Yeah.
So was it the Napoleon Hill book? Think
and Grow Rich. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that, or was it the Richest Man in Babylon? I can't remember. There was a book where it talks very much about paying yourself first, and you need to be putting some money aside.
Yeah.
I mean, because the whole thing with investing is that you cumulative returns. So you put a little away early on, and you start that from an early age, and it becomes a very large amount over a long period of time. There's probably the most successful investor in the world is a guy called Warren Buffett. Yeah, you probably heard of. But one of the things about him is that he's invested for an extraordinarily long time. I think he's invested since he was 17 years old, and he's in his 90s. And he's an incredibly wealthy guy. I mean, he's also clearly a very intelligent sort of
quite sharp.
Yeah. But he's invested and had that patience to wait and allow those investments to deliver the returns over a period of time. I mean, when it comes to investing, the biggest mistake you can make is obviously when markets go south, as they inevitably do from time to time, is to come out of those markets at that time.
Yeah.
The biggest sort of skill or superpower you've got with investing is patience.
Yeah, it's to see the sort of like the 100 years or the 50 years and look at the patterns and then look at the principles, and that's how wealthy people get it. They know when they're going to come. They can see the signs.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say not. I mean, I think it's difficult to see the signs. I think it's understanding that investments deliver over time, but obviously it's if you're looking at the best kind of investments, which are generally global shares, they give you a roller coaster ride. Every few years there's something that happens. Ukraine war, energy crisis, pandemic, whatever it might be, Brexit in the UK stock market. These things have a big impact and can't necessarily be predicted, but markets always recover, or at least always have done up until now, and you need to stay that ride, and that's when you'll see the big returns. I mean, effectively, investing in companies is investing in human ingenuity.
Yeah,
you're investing in the sort of the best and brightest minds in the world.
Yeah, of course,
because they're running these companies and finding ways to make profits. And so you just got to have that confidence that that's going to continue, and that we're going to keep finding ways to make more profit and generate returns. And that's what's always worked. And I believe that's what will always continue to work.
No, it's right. It's about having the right people in your corner that have done it long enough to say, look, okay, I might not be able to tell you this is going to happen, but the signs are leading us to come to some of these conclusions. But, someone taught me early on about that in terms of investment is think long term, don't think short term. Because it always changes. How many recessions, when they say we got a recession, it's like, that's not the first time that's happened. Markets crash. Not the first time it's happened, but because we see life in like this, we think, this is the only time it's happened, or how are we going to cope and whatever. But then you come out and look at the macro and you go, well, it happened there, it happened there. Okay, well, what did they learn, or what did they do then that then makes... Let's look at what happened with the winners, because there's always winners in every market. So what did the winners do? And I think that's what's quite interesting, looking at that journey and going, well, okay, what can we learn? And a lot of it, as you said, is patience.
Yeah, and it's also living within your means, isn't there? I mean, there's another book I can't remember that I haven't read yet, but I've been told about, and it's a book where this guy analysed all these wealthy families in America and looked down the generations to see, how that wealth has kind of continued or not. And he found that actually most of that wealth hasn't continued. And through the generations, and effectively, it's been spent unwisely by future generations. And otherwise, all these sort of very, very, very wealthy families from 100 years ago, almost none of them are mega wealthy now. And if all they'd done was put that wealth in an index tracker and invested it in the companies across, then they would be mega wealthy now. But unfortunately, what they'd end up doing is they end up, from what I understand, go and spend on unnecessary stuff. And get spend beyond their means.
It's an interesting one because I think the thing that I saw something similar was that it's normally gone within 4 generations, the wealth. So like one person creates it, another one builds upon it, then the other one spends it, and then the other one just completely makes bad decisions and crushes it. And the most successful companies in the world often have a much longer term vision. And there's a concept out there is 100-year visions. is planning for 100 years, which a generation I think is measured at 25 years. So, 100 years is 4 generations, which could mitigate some of those mistakes. Because if you've got a family that understand it, and certainly within certain cultures, they do get it, particularly the Jewish culture, for example, that's why they are wealthy, is they plan multi-generations. And I think, back to the very beginning of our conversation is saying, what can I learn from the previous generation and build upon? And I think if you can think generationally and go, I might not get it all right here, but it's better than there. And if the next generation builds better than what I am here, then hopefully we're moving towards something which is a much better standing for the future.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I guess you've got to think as well, what with a business, what's the natural evolution of that business? Is it, should it be a business that's passed down through those generations? Are you likely to find people who are talented and passionate about that business down in those future generations? Or is it actually better off that the business is sold?
Yeah.
And then the wealth is invested by the family to facilitate a lifestyle into the future. And then that business can continue with the right person on board to run it. I mean, there's lots of different ways of selling businesses nowadays. I mean, you were familiar with employee ownership trusts.
Yeah.
So that's something that started
fairly new,
to become
fairly emergent,
fairly new option but very tax efficient. And it's something that, so there's a guy that had a business actually in Bristol, he's a guy called Chris Budd. I don't know him personally, but he ran a business called Ovation.
Okay.
And it was a very successful financial planning business, small financial planning business, relatively small, bigger than mine, but relatively small. And so he went through the process and sold his business to the Employee Ownership Trust. And now works as a consultant he set up an institute of well-being, I think it is. And he also advises people on EOTs.
No, it's definitely, that's definitely one of the new emergent things. I mean, I was talking to someone at quite a large company that have put that into place, and they've said, even though they've got that, they still want more. They're like, what more can I do? And then so they've had staff that have left that organization and then come back and realize, we got it really good here. And I think that's the key thing, is communicating what it is and communicating what you've got, because sometimes it's not always greener on the other side. But what I do like about, these things out there is that building businesses beyond one generation or beyond the two is hard, but then there are people out there that are going after the VC money, and we exit in 5 years and and the magic unicorn, and we're all exit, and it's not necessarily the case. And I think sometimes the best businesses I've seen is they've been built around a core team and then they've exited. And yeah, you're right. They realize that actually to make the vision successful, and this is the key thing, making the decisions based on the vision of the original company, it is best to exit because they can reach more people and be more impactful. And in that case, then, whether it's an MBO or whatever, sometimes the founder is involved to help make sure it, as it's getting its legs and starting to walk again, to head off in that right direction. And so I think, employee-owned trust is, that is definitely something to be looking at as a purposeful business. And I think for me, some of the other exciting things like B Corps, becoming a B Corporation. My creative agency is a B Corp, for example, and it just gets everyone focused on purpose as well as profit, for example. So there are things out there now where we want to be more meaningful. We want to work better. We want to work smarter. We want to be kinder, not only to the owners, but to the team as well, and create opportunities. So, there is hope in what seems to be a dark world of business, because of the financial pressures we've all been under. I think there is hope where people are going, but the good guys can win, and we just need to work together to make that happen.
Well, I think life is changing, isn't it? I think certainly the business environment that I've seen is changing. It's been changing hugely since when I first started working. And I mean, some of that is not necessarily for the good, I don't think, always, but at the same time, I think it is also for the good. I think, this authoritarian kind of approach that maybe worked and or at least was followed in the past doesn't really work now.
No, and I think if you approach life that way and not understand, then talk about generations again. We live longer than ever, so you got the chance that you're going to be working with 4 generations at one time. Baby Boomer, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. They all been brought up in a completely different school system.
Absolutely.
So if you want to flourish, the guys at the top end need to understand what the guys and girls at the bottom end are, how they process life. And I think those that win are the ones that understand it. So I'm Gen X. I think you might be Gen X as well.
Correct.
So they've often been that buffer between baby boomers and millennials, where the boomer would go, I can't work with these crazy kids, and Gen X like, well, I'm having to, so I need to understand them. And what I'm finding quite heartening now is seeing Gen Y going, these Gen Zs are crazy, by comparison. It's like, okay, now are you going to take the same amount of time that we did to learn what they are? Because it's understanding what's important to them, because you can't build a workforce without knowing. Otherwise, you haven't got a business if you haven't got people working in the business. So I think we have to adapt and we have to change.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I most of my client base are boomers.
Yeah.
So that's to be honest, I feel quite comfortable working with those boomers.
Yeah.
But as you say, running a business, I've got to be employing Gen Y, Gen Z potentially.
That's it.
And so you've got to understand that and understand what makes them tick and how they work and it's.
The biggest one I learned very early on that Gen Y celebrate things by experience and Gen X celebrate by stuff. That was a biggie. So when you think about it, you're successful, you win the amount of money or whatever it is, and you go and buy yourself a nice watch or a car or whatever it may be. Whereas a millennial will go, no, I'm going away for a weekend or going on holiday or whatever. So there are some of those things. And when you understand it, generational psychology, it really helps you bring people together. And all of a sudden, and you also see that things go full cycle. What essentially baby boomers are, and then you got Gen Z, they're almost coming to the baby boomers conclusion. So there is a natural connection between the generations. So they would say Gen Z's become more conservative, for example. So, in terms of their outlook in life. So like getting completely drunk at the weekend and that sort of stuff, they're not necessarily drinkers, Gen Z, So it's quite an interesting change of events. But, within 100 years, things change. And I think there is a YouTube video going around where they actually mapped it out in 400-year segments, and we do repeat history. It's quite scary, but we're creatures of habit, as they say.
Absolutely.
So, how would someone be able to get in touch with you, Steve? Is it just find your website, reach out, fill in a form?
Yeah. So we've got a website, britannicplace.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
So one of the things that I've developed over the last year or so is trying to build up my presence on LinkedIn. It's something, I'm not naturally somebody who does a lot of social media, but I was actually I've got a marketing consultant, and he's big on LinkedIn, and he was sort of pushing me to do it. So I do it, although obviously my mates absolutely slaughter me for it, some of the stuff. That's when most of the people who are my mates are rugby people, and they just tend to take the mickey out of everything. So, so people can connect with me on LinkedIn. And that's probably it.
No, it's interesting. I mean, I'm a football fan, so my guy who's left now, Jurgen Klopp, he even ventured into the world of Instagram yesterday, and I think within 6 hours had 1.1 million followers. He's like a kid in a sweet shop now. Look, this is a picture of this, and then uploads it. So we sometimes have to embrace things that are a bit uncomfortable to embrace a new future. So thank you for taking the time and joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Everybody, thank you for listening to the Purpose People podcast. You can obviously see us on YouTube, where you can see our wonderful setting here that we film every time we do a podcast. But you can also listen to us just in your ears on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and Google. Please like and subscribe to YouTube, and please leave a review on our podcast. It really helps us get the message out that can help people live a life on purpose for purpose. We want to help you make purpose a priority.